Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Not sure where you're calling from, but my name is Teresa Moulton, and I am the editor-in-chief of the Change Management Review. I am here with Dr. Grant Van Ulbrich of Scared So What, and he is going to be really teaching us a lot about how personal change and organizational change go together, and really a lot about how personal change really needs to be paid attention to in addition to organizational change. We can't just leave it all at the door once we're done with the organization. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce you to Grant, Dr. Grant, and we will take it from there. A native from the U.S. state of Kansas, Grant has over 20 years selling and sailing across oceans while working on board cruise ships and shoreside and leadership roles in sales, operations, human resources, and revenue management roles. He launched the first modern luxury retail travel agencies at sea with Celebrity Cruises and Royal Caribbean International. He is professionalizing sales through sales science and psychology to support his global sales teams for the Royal Caribbean International Cruise Line brand. Living in central London, England, Grant is the first member in the travel and tourism industry to graduate the Master's in Science and Professional Practice Leading Sales Transformation with Consalia Limited at Middlesex University with honors. He is also the first doctor focusing on sales transformation in the industry through the Doctorate Professional Studies by Public Works at Middlesex University of London. Grant is a certified sales transformation coach and is also a founding fellow of the Institute of Sales Professionals. More information can be found at www.scaredsowhat.com. So what is Scared So What? Let's hear from Grant. And Dr. Grant, we're all ears. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you so much. That's such a, wow, you make me sound so much more than I am. I'm just a normal human being like everyone else, but it's a great honor to be here with you. And it's a great privilege to be working with you as well too, with my book and with all of the personal change process that we're going forward. To everybody who's joining the call today, I want to thank you so much. Obviously, you're interested in change management, which is wonderful. Change practitioners and leading people through change. That's our mission, that's our passion, and that's what we're working to strive to do. And hopefully today, I will be able to give focus on the most important aspect, I believe, in change management is the individual, the person who is expected to carry out the change for organizations, but also what about their everyday lives? And so, again, I'm Dr. Grant Van Ulbrich, and it's a joy to be with you today. So hopefully we can begin to facilitate a conversation and maybe change some minds along the way. So my agenda for today that Teresa and I discussed would be just to get to know just who I am just a little bit so we could start to say hello. I would love to connect with each and every one of you, and I'll show you how at the end of this discussion today. I would like to introduce to you what is personal change and how do I define what personal change is and why is there a distinction between change, organizational change, change itself, and personal change. We'll also talk just a little bit, well, why a new model? Don't we have so many already? And the answer is yes. There are a lot of models out there and they're wonderful what they were designed to do. But we'll talk about that just for a little bit because it's important to highlight. And then we'll go into what is Scared So What? It is the first personal change model that has been designed bespoke for individuals, regardless if they accept change or reject change. It helps them to navigate their way through it. So we'll talk about that. Who's the target audience for Scared So What? Throughout our research, who were the people that we utilized and practiced this with? We'll also talk about what about leadership? And what about those wonderful, important coaches who help guide us and nourish us along our way throughout our journey? And then I'll share with you some resources and support for Scared So What, so you can see and adopt it yourself, or just further the discussion. And something I always like to say, and that's come throughout all of my research from my Sales Master's program and the doctorate, where Scared So What was born, is that change is constant. It's personal. How you manage it can make it bearable and achievable. And so something for us to think about as we go forward with our lives and professional support of change and change management and change adoption for everybody. Okay, so hopefully that's okay with you. If you've tuned in, hopefully these will be the things you'll be able to learn through today. So a little bit about me. Well, who am I and who's this crazy guy who invented a personal change model and why? As you see here, I've got my right hand, Mr. Sean Lyons, who champions me in sales transformation for the cruise industry. We are the first to pioneer sales transformation inside the cruise and hospitality industry. And my role is the Global Director of Sales Transformation for Royal Caribbean International. And we are one of the world's leading cruise lines. You can see one of our big ships right there behind us. That's the Wonder of the Seas, who holds just over 6,500 guests, enjoying wonderful vacation experiences around the world. And I lead all of the sales teams around the world, focused primarily for our international markets, which is UK, Ireland, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, Australia, Singapore, and Indonesia, and also our Latin Caribbean countries. So all of our sales teams that support for those areas, my job is to transform from the old way of selling into the new way of sales, into the way people want to be sold to today. And that's focusing on the customer's wants and needs and their expectations from us. And I do this through sales education. So taking the Sales Masters program, which was one of the first Masters in Science exclusively for the sales profession, through Middlesex University and the Consalia Sales Business School. That's where I built out Scared So What and started to test that throughout all of our international sales teams and through our customers, our B2B customers. And I continued that research into the sales doctorate program with Middlesex University that I have since completed. So that's a little bit about me. I work in cruise, but it's a little bit different. I spent 15 years on board ships working around the world, and then I transitioned shoreside to continue into sales transformation. All right, so what is personal change? So I define through all of my research that personal change is a change that is about you, for you, with you, or because of you, or that focuses on you. We would all agree that there's change that happens all around the world, right? Environmental change, corporate change, society impact change, all different types that happen. But personal change is when it affects each and every one of us personally. And so it's any change situation that is directly about or involves you. And if you think about it, how do we manage personal change? Well, I, for one, in my lifetime, have never been taught how to manage personal change. I've learned of organizational change in my adult years through my workforce life. But in my early years, whenever I had a panicky situation or something to happen to me, if I went to my parents, mom, dad, maybe a teacher or that favorite pastor who would guide us spiritually as well, whatever change I had, I would explain it to them and they would give me nice platitudes. They would tell me, oh, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. Or maybe when mom and dad said it, they'd say, stop panicking. Don't stress, don't worry. Does that sound familiar to any of you? Has that ever happened to you in your life? You have a change situation that happens personally, and you go to somebody, and they just don't really know what to say. They have a nice conversation and listen to you, but at the end of it, did they say these things to you? Don't worry, you'll be fine. It's okay. Or stop stressing. Teresa, have you ever had that happen before?
Oh, yes. That's why I'm in this business.
There you go. And that's why you're a change guru and championing all of us. But I ask you, did it ever make you feel good? And the answer typically is maybe for a moment, but then it really transitions over to no. And why is that? Well, that's because our bodies and our minds were designed to do things for a reason. And if you think about why our bodies and our minds react, if it's a negative change, something that's really scary or fearful, or even if it's a positive change, think like you're getting married or you're getting a new house or buying a new car. You know, sometimes those things, your bodies react the same way. You start to breathe a little bit more excited. Maybe you get goosebumps and the hair stands up on your arms for an exciting change. Your bodies are telling you something's happening. And to sit and tell somebody, oh, don't worry about it, or you'll just be fine, or don't stress, that kind of goes counter to what our minds and what our bodies are telling us. And so Scared So What was born. It was born to say, how can we stop and actually reflect? Could we critically reflect on the changes that are happening to us so that we can feel good and so that we can possibly start to manage it for ourselves? So why a new model? Well, Teresa and I talked about this before as well too. There are so many wonderful models that are out there. And in my research, I had to study them, intensively study them. And at some points, I was able to reach out to the creators themselves and have interviews with them and find out, well, what do you think the missing element is? There's the rumors that go around all over the world that say 70% of change management fails. And a good dear friend, Dr. David Wilkinson, who is the executive chair and the chief editor of the Oxford Review, he did an extensive research into this to find out, well, that 70% of change management failure is really a myth. If you go back to the originator, to John Carter, what he said was 30% of change management is successful. The other is in an area of sometimes missed or sometimes unknown. So again, people take the information and they sway it to whatever element that suits them. These models are fantastic at leading organizational change. And what I could conclude from my global research is that there is no one model that will teach every person how to manage change, whether it's at an organization or for themselves. But one thing that I did focus on and find throughout my research is there are a lot. And aren't there enough already? And maybe that's true. But one thing that I did find was most of these models are prescriptive, and they are meant to help facilitate organizational change. And those are the key elements that bring all of these models together. They're meant to use for organizations and workplace change. Again, brilliant at what they do. But the one key element that is typically missing is, what about the individual? And what about the person who is expected to carry out the change? So I looked hard at, well, what would help them? What is at the focus of their needs and their wants and needs? And as an experienced leader in business, you know, I stopped and I was speaking with Teresa earlier as well. No one in my career path has ever stopped and said, hey, Grant, do you accept this change? Is this change for you? And will you support this change? Those are just not typical questions that we are asked. We are introduced to the models and we follow the directions as best as possible to try to make the change transition happen. And then many people say within sales, well, my sales team are just superstars. And I hear that from every business and every entity around the world. And some will even go so far as say, well, they don't feel change. They thrive in it for the sales team. And that echoes throughout many different teams, not just in sales. But I ask the question to you, what's under the surface? Whenever change happens, do you ask people on your teams, do you accept this change? Do you embrace this change? Are you comfortable taking on this change? And you have to ask yourselves, as leaders, as teachers, instructors, coaches, supervisors, human resource supports, whoever you may be in whatever role you have, when you're launching change within your organizations or just thinking about change to yourself, does anybody who's coaching you or who's talking with you ask you these questions? Typically, the answer is no, they don't. And that's a shame, because what happens if they're not on board or they're rejecting change? If we don't ask these questions of the individuals expected to carry out change, will we know? And often we don't. So often what happens is, if they're not on board, things go wrong, and things can go wrong. And sometimes you'll see it, but most times you might not even notice. If you're a supervisor of a major organization or company, small company, startup, whatever you are, you have to think, some people, some employees are so scared they don't want to say anything. They don't want to offend you as a leader, so they just go along with it. But inside, they might be feeling torment. It's personal. Change that happens is personal. And if we don't know how to manage it, then these might be the results that you receive. The existing models may not support an individual's personal change. And that's important for you to understand what I just said. The existing models are brilliant at what they do. But again, even from the change leaders themselves. Why does change fail? Typically because the individual was not brought in or not included. So something needed to be created to support the individual's journey. And that was my challenge when I was learning this through university. And that's where Scared So What was born. So how do we manage change with Scared So What? The first step is to understand your feelings. And this is critical. Again, in those instances where I shared with you earlier, when you go to a friend, a colleague, a supervisor, mom, dad, or anybody that you look to for support, and they come back to you with the don'ts, don't worry about it, don't stress, don't panic. It doesn't make you feel good. Well, and that leaves you in a situation of you're just sitting here trying to say, well, how am I going to manage this for myself? And through research, you can bring critical reflection on yourself and practice it with yourself by using the SCARED process. So in this diagram, you see here that you are at the center of the inquiry. You are at the center of your own critical reflection. And the change that's happening to you is personal. So it's about you, it's for you, or it's with you. So you're synonymous with the change that's happening. And on the outside are the reflection elements. Now, this model is not linear. And I learned that from Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's son, Ken Ross, when he said his mother did not invent a model that was meant to be linear, but most people thought that it was. And so what I'm trying to do is facilitate a conversation. It can be an internal dialogue, or it can be done with peers and colleagues and friends or family. And typically you would start out with surprise at the top and asking yourself, all right, how do I feel about this change? Is it a surprise to me? Positive surprise, neutral, or negative? And then you move forward and you start to formulate an opinion with yourself about the change. Am I championing this change? Meaning, do I really like it? Is it positive energy? Or am I in conflict about this change and I'm not feeling good about it? You move forward with actions. And as we know in sales, action is where everything is at. Actions that you take are what bring in information and focal points. So what actions could you take about the change that's happening with you? Could you call someone? Could you do an email? Could you do some research? Could you have a discussion with a friend, a peer, or a colleague? These are action points where you want to bring in information, and bringing in actions will help you to be able to make a better, more informed decision. And that's the goal of SCARED in understanding your feelings. We don't want people to be making assumptions or assumptive decisions or knee-jerk reaction decisions. We want people to stop and think about it, critically reflect about what's happening, and learn how you can start to manage personal change. After you've done this, you're probably starting to, again, formulate your opinion on the change, and you might be becoming more receptive or more rejective to the change. Again, SCARED includes the ability for people to reject change, and that's important to us. And it doesn't mean it's wrong, because some change is not for us, but you're still going to be left asking yourself, well, so what can I do? Or so what does this mean to me? So from there, again, since actions are so critical to the thought process and to assessing your own feelings in a personal change situation, you want to give yourself another action point, and that is explore. Could you further explore other options or opportunities to help you make the most impactful change decision for yourself? And if you can, then you move forward to decision. And you'll see a red line here. And that's meant because it's supposed to guide you to break out of your feeling process with an informed decision. That's the goal of SCARED. We want you to stop, reflect on a change, have a critical assessment with yourself, engage in some action points so you can bring in further information so that you can make an informed decision. And hopefully it'll be a favorable one. But if it's not, and it's a negative decision, that's okay too. Remember, not every change is for every person. But you'll notice there's also the word indecision. Does this happen to you at any moment? You ever in a change situation, you stop and say, I just don't know what to do, or I'm unsure. I don't know where to go. That's called indecision. You're in between. You're neither championing it and you're not rejecting it. You're just kind of stuck in the middle. And typically what we will see in the quiz that we have launched that supports this as well too, people can take their own quiz and they can see these scared results. And you will typically see in the actions and the explore, they would be red, meaning that you've taken very little actions. You've not explored hardly any options or opportunities to bring in information. If you do that, if you focus on these 2 action items, you will have more information brought into you so that you can possibly make a decision either way, whether it's favorable or unfavorable. Okay, so that's the first step, is to focus on what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what the change means for you. Okay, that is embracing your feelings with scared. Now, it's important for you to also know that reflection is not linear. This model is not linear, and it was not designed. And that was important learning from Daryl Connor, who has some wonderful change models, and also Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in my interviews with Ken Ross. It's just not how people think. People think in scattered formation. And so that's why we've built this model to reflect on the energy spectrum that people actually live in. So we all experience happy change or positive change, positive energy that happens to us. We have neutral. Sometimes personal change comes to us, we're just like, I'm not so sure. It kind of involves me, kind of doesn't involve me. I don't feel really strongly either way. And then we also have negative energy. And the negative side is where I'm possibly rejecting the change. And as you can see here through this model, the scared, which is the surprise, champion, conflicted, action, receptive, rejective, explore, and then decision makeout. It is up and down, and you can move up and down through your reflection process, because that's what typically happens with people. As you gain more actions, as you explore more options or opportunities, you're bringing in more information, and hopefully you can start to formulate what your decision will be. And you can also vacillate back and forth, which is why indecision is so prominent and it happens to so many people. But you also see here, the goal at the end is to break out with an informed decision where that would be favorable towards you, meaning hopefully you like the change that's happening with you, but at least you reflected on it and you have informed decision points from that. But again, also people can reject change, and that's not bad. It just means that this change might not be for them. So they would be left asking themselves, well, so what? So what does it mean? Or so what can I do about it? And that's where we need to help people to continue the journey past their feelings into, well, how do I make a plan of action? And that's a key difference. If you look at the organizational change models we have there today, they typically tell you how to formulate a change process in an organization structure. This one, actually scared, supports that. And so it comes in to include the individual feelings and thoughts as well to help them make a decision about the change. But where we see the fall off is the so what? What can we do about it? Or what does it mean for me? And so the next part we go into is, right, I understand how I feel about a change, but so what can I do about it? So again, on the so what wheel, you are at the center of the change process. It's your change. You've made a decision about it, regardless if it's favorable or unfavorable. And what we want to do, again, is make a critical reflective opportunity for you to stop and say, how will I manage this change? And you can stop and think about it reflectively. So the first part to start with is strategy. What is your strategy or your plan? What do you want to include? And you start to jot those down. What are the steps that you will take to make sure that your change is successful for you? And then, since actions are so important and so critical to bringing in positive information, you want another opportunity to focus. Are there any other options or opportunities for you to include that can strengthen your strategy and your plan for executing this change? So think like a very big change that could happen, positive. You're getting married. Are you just going to let that happen? Or are you going to actually apply some thought process to how you're going to build, execute, get it ready to go, set the dates, send out the invitations, do all of the logistics, etc.? Of course, you're going to do a plan. And that is what this is guiding to help you to do. Likewise, the same thing if it is a negative change. Let's say you're at work and you're facing a global reorg. I've had much experience with this, with our sales team's members. Even though that global reorg could be very positive and people will be promoted and have more incentive, people still fear change. And this is a way for them to build their own so what strategy plan. Once you've done your strategy and your options and you've jotted those down and you're starting to reflect on what they are, you want to ask yourself, do I have a way forward? And so again, since it sounds a little bit odd to ask those questions, but this is personal change, right? So it's really personal to the individuals who are expected to carry out the change. Do I have a way forward with my strategy and my options? If you can answer yes, then great, move forward. If you can't answer yes, then you might need to continue working on your strategy or your options and opportunities to make sure that you can get it into a place that you feel comfortable about it and you feel you can execute and move forward. The hope and the how is at the core of who we are and what we do. Do I have hope that this will work? Or do I know how this will work? The goal here is to be truthful and authentic to yourself in saying, do I have hope or do I know how I can do this? Hopefully you can answer yes. Because if you can't, then you, again, should probably go backwards and rework until you feel more comfortable about your strategy options and your way forward. If you can move forward, then again, you've got to think, well, what are the actions I'm going to do to execute my change? What actions will I take? Start to identify them and start to jot them down. In our app, which I'll share with you in just a few moments, you have a template and a section designated for you to actually build those and put them in the palm of your hand. So actions are so important to help us because they help to create milestones, and that's into the taking ownership. What will I do to ensure I take ownership for my change so that I can achieve the change outcome that I want? And taking ownership could be establishing milestones, reminders, identify key people who need to be involved to support my change process for me, whether it's at work or at home, wherever I am in my life. And so how do I ensure that I take ownership? That's the key principles there as well too. So again, what you've got is scared, my feelings. What am I feeling for it? How can I think through with critical reflection so that I can make an informed decision, whatever the outcome is for myself? And then, so what? What will I do? What's my plan? What's my strategy? Do I have a way forward? Do I have hope or do I know how I'm going to do this? And what actions can I take? And finally, how can I ensure that I take ownership? Now you can do this all together on your own. You can think it out, you can write it on a piece of paper, or you can do it into our new app, which I'll share with you. But who's this for? Who is Scared So What for? What is the audience? And so from 2019 to today, we've been testing this. When I say we, my colleagues and myself within Royal Caribbean Cruises Global, we've been testing this with our sales employees and our employees all over the world, from Russia, Ukraine as well, to Europe, Middle East, and Africa, all the way to Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Asia, Indonesia, through Latin Caribbean as well too. From people who are in their senior years, all the way to as young as 14 years old. And how did that happen? The youngsters happened when after we gave it to our salespeople, we then decided to share this with our B2B customers, which are travel agents across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And in our research, over 1,100 travel agents participated in a learning academy where we shared Scared So What, and we taught them how to use it for themselves. There is a quiz for Scared for them to do a self-assess quiz, and they could see the results and guide them and how they're feeling so that once they've made a decision. And then there was a So What template that we gave them, which at the time was an Excel template for them to build their own So What plan of action. And we did this throughout the global pandemic when in the cruise industry, our complete industry shut down. We went from within our industry and our brands over $8 billion a year to zero in revenue. All ships completely shut down. And the same for the travel industry. Travel agents around the world, they went from thriving businesses to zero business, no transaction, no hotel reservation, no flight reservation, no cruise ships, no land vacations at all. People were scared and they were terrified of how they were going to survive. What we found was through our salespeople, it was so interesting. We had office closures that had to happen in the pandemic We had sales teams that we had to transition and lose. But over their transitions, we implemented Scared So What, and people were no longer scared. People were coming up to us and saying, well, I've made a decision. I now have my So What plan, and this is what I need from you as leadership. So many of the sales team members were saying, I need help with recruitment. I need help with resumes. I need help with support. And they went on and did their day jobs as normal, when we as the leadership completely expected that they would completely disengage. They didn't. They actually stayed engaged because they were able to help think the process through with Scared So What. Likewise, the same thing was happening for our B2B customers, our travel agents. And what was unique was we had our sales teams and our travel customers on the same page together. So then we found we had sales team members who were talking with travel agents about Scared So What as well too, helping each other to utilize their own decisions and their own So What plans. So we had travel agents that came back to me and they said, I am now using this for my children and for my family. And as young as 14 years old is what we had found, that people were utilizing it with their youngsters, and they were able to embrace change much faster because they don't have the excess baggage and unconscious bias of years of experience dealing with change that we have today. And remember how I started this out. You know, we have not been taught how to manage personal change for ourselves. And so this was just amazing throughout the global research and people using it, how they could quickly replicate Scared, assess their feelings, and then build their own So What together. So the audience truly was global with a basic understanding of English. We only had Scared So What written in the English language. We didn't translate it, but that's something we'll continue to do as we go for our research. But what about the question that came, and people ask me often, what about leaders? And what about coaching? And again, as I've shared with you, from my perspective as a practicing academic, I feel it's critically important that we bring the individuals along on the journey of change. And so that's why I still use, and we still practice, we use the global organizational change models within our business entity worldwide, but I use Scared So What to make sure that I have the individuals included and I have their thoughts and their wants and needs in the change process as well. And that's where they complement each other. You have organizational change models and you have the individual change model, and you bridge the gap. So that 70% of change management failure, I want to bridge that gap if that really is true. And I make sure that I'm including my individual employees along the journey of any change process that we do and that I'm responsible for. And as I go out throughout sales leadership, I ask the question to each and every one of them. If you're leading any enterprise or any business, any function, or even if you're a mom and dad with kids, don't you want to know if people are on board with the changes that you implement or that you put into practice? And they say yes. And then I ask them, well, how do you do that today? And they don't know. And so what I teach here with Scared So What, as a leader, and specifically, I'm a certified sales coach as well too. I use Scared So What as a coaching mechanism and a coaching model. And as the letters say, Scared, S-C-A-R-D-E-D, I can go through as a coach and ask open-ended questions to the individual and guide them through the feelings portion so that they can make a favorable decision, whatever it is. And then I can continue coaching them to build their own So What plan. So from a leadership perspective, we're gaining access to the individuals. From a diversity inclusion perspective, we're including them. We're expanding diversity by bringing more people into the conversation. And from a coaching perspective, I can use it to actually facilitate their wants and needs, associating with their feelings, and then associating with their own So What plan that's important to them. So it really is a huge benefit to help drive the conversation of including personal change. But it's new. You know, this started in 2019 in my Sales Masters program, when my professors were teaching me about all the global organizational change models. And I said, but what about the individual? And my professors said, that's important. And I said, don't we believe that people can accept or reject change? They said, yes. I said, these models don't include that. And the answer was, perhaps you should build your own. And so that's what I did. So very passionate about people, very passionate about their own ability to accept or reject change. And as a leader, I want to know how everyone feels in my workplace. And I want to know if they're on board, and I want to champion them so that they can be on board. And Scared So What has been that mechanism to support them. So what about continued learning? If you would like to learn more, what I have done is I've taken my academic and my practice journey and put it into my first book. It's called Transforming Sales Management, because that's exactly what I do. But I'm focusing for the first time on the individuals and leading them through their personal change within the workforce as well. Now, in my research in the master's and the doctorate, I had to read tons of books, as you could possibly imagine, to earn those qualifications and distinctions. And I found that every single model was written about by itself. And that was difficult for me. I managed to get through it. That was a good change I embraced. But I wanted to give something behind to you as well, too, and to everybody else. So I put the top 8 global change models that I found to be incredibly impactful, and I put them in one book. So I then focused on the individual, why they're so critically important to change success, and bringing in their voice. And then I talk about Scared So What, and I give practical examples of how we've used it across the world within business, both personally and professionally. And so I really see this as the complete change management book, because it focuses on organizational change, but also the individual change, bringing them together. So while it is focused on as a business book for sales, it's not just for sales. It's for everyone, whether in human resources, if you're in operational leadership, if you're in IT sector, whatever you are. We're all people, and we all embrace personal change differently and uniquely. And I'm hoping that Scared So What can help bridge the gap between those who lead organizational change, coaches who lead change management and executive management, and also to leaderships across the world. So I offer a discount for you if you choose to get it. It's available for pre-order now. The book will release on May 3rd here in Europe, and it will release on May 30th in the United States and North America. And I'm sure Teresa will make sure you can get a copy of this webinar and these files as well too. But it doesn't just stop there. The book is not just by itself. Again, I'm very passionate about this, trying to help change the world, so to speak. So I've taken this and put it into a model, an app. And as I shared with you earlier, there was a Scared quiz, so people could assess their feelings readily and quickly, and have a visual output that says, well, how am I feeling about this change? And then I wanted them to be able to build their own So What plan. And over the past 4 or 5 years, it's been in Excel. But I'm happy to say we're now putting that into an application. And the book, the last page of the book, the last chapter, will launch this so that you can actually download the app for free. I do have a mission and vision. I was explaining with Teresa at the start of this call. I want to help people to learn how to manage personal change for themselves. That is critically important to me, and that is my mission. And so for that, the app for individuals is absolutely free. You can download that on the Apple, from the Apple Store, or that process, or even Android. And you can have the ability to manage personal change in your hand. And you can see here on the left, you have the introduction, and the center, you can actually take your own Scared quiz. You take a series of answering 30 questions, reflecting over your change process, and you get a result. And as you push each one of these buttons here under SCARED, there'll be a video that pops up to tell you what your change outcome is and why you scored that way and what you could do. And this helps you with your feelings. Then you move on to build your So What plan, and it's all editable, and it guides you to build your strategy so that whatever your vision of success is, you've got it documented, and you can include yourself or others. And then you'll have that where you can save it directly in your saved plans for you. The app will also have videos and resources for you to learn about personal changes we shared today. But again, it's free for everybody to download and to play with, and to begin to learn how to manage personal change for themselves. And so that's critically important for me to give back to the world and to you. And so with that, if you'd love to if you would love to learn more, you want to contact with me, I'm sharing my information as well. All of the information is at scaredsowhat.com, but please do connect with me on LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. That's where Teresa and I met. And she's such a champion and a guru, and I'm so happy and thankful she's endorsed the book as well too. So if she endorses it, hopefully you'll like it as well. But let's stay together and continue the conversation. And with that, I'll open it back up to Teresa and say thank you.
Great, thank you, Grant. How many questions do we have? Do we have any questions out there for Grant? I would say just jump in.
I'll stop sharing and come back with you guys.
I have a question, Grant. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, this is Vicki Fraser. Teresa knows I always ask questions, but my question is, I love the model. I love the idea with scared, and I do often see resistance in terms of fear. And it's not always direct, it's often passive, aggressive, or avoidance, however. What do you do when you do have a change that is mandatory? So even if they're scared and they've chosen not to do this, we give them, what do we do with that? Because at some point we have to shift them because it's required.
Yeah, well, and that's a beautiful example of where organizational change and personal change has to come together.
Okay.
And in my research of putting this through to my organization, I worked heavily with our change leaders and our directors of change management within organizational change within the company. And I see a great question. Someone said, how is this different from ADKAR? And my change leaders within Royal Caribbean loved ADKAR. They're Prosky certified and championing that as well too. But what they came to realize is that ADKAR and so many of the other organizational change models are typically prescriptive. And yes, they don't go as deep to say, well, what happens if the individual rejects the change? Mm-hmm. What do you do then? And that's to your point right here. What happens if they reject it? So if I think of, awareness, desire, knowledge, etc., to go through of it, nowhere in those does it ask, do you accept this change? Right. Do you, how do you feel? And better yet, what do you do if you reject it? So our leaders who were well versed and certified in many different models, they came through and say, you know what? The great thing about Scared So What is it can go together with the organizational change platform. Anyone, because organizational change and the models are designed to execute the change process throughout the work enforcement. But you've got to bring the individual in on the journey. And to your point, if somebody does reject the change, number one, you would be aware of it. If you could facilitate that conversation with them, it could be a human resource person that does it. It could be a coach that does it. It has to be somebody they trust, because what you're doing is you're giving the individual the first, probably the very first point to say, well, how do I manage change for myself? And if they have visually through using the model come through and say, all right, I reject this change, I don't like it. Then you can express and say, well, did you do the actions or have you explored any further options? If you haven't, could we facilitate that conversation? Could we bring in more information that might help you make a different decision? Or if the change is just not for you as a leader, then I'm going to ask the questions, what does change success look like for you? What do you need? How do I help you get there? How do I help you get on board? This is where I become the coach, right?
Right.
Practice into play, because I want to focus and help them to get on board. And remember, not every change is for every person. That's okay. If you're in an organization and somebody is just completely flat out rejecting the changes you've implemented, number one, as leaders and HR professionals or coaches, we owe it to them to help them through the journey. That's what Scared So What does. But if they still reject it, then you've got a decision point to make. Do you stay with them? Do they stay with you? They're human beings. They can leave organizations as well too. But then you would at least not be making assumptive changes or knee-jerk reactions.
Good point.
You'd have well thought out process, something to guide the individual through the journey, and also something to guide the organization through the journey as well. So that's where I was talking with Teresa earlier. I want to bridge the gap and make change much more able to be successful. So you've got the organizational change models. Now we've got the individuals let's bring them together.
Thank you, Grant. That's great.
You're welcome.
Grant, we have a question in the chat box. Does the book cover some showcase some examples?
Absolutely it does, and thank you for that. My editors would not let me get anywhere if I didn't have real world examples. And so what I have done was, since we have launched this within my organization, I capture those real world examples. So examples from launching organizational global restructure. If you've imagined in the cruise industry, even though it was a horrible time in our lives, it was a beautiful opportunity to test out a brand new change model. We went from, billions of dollars in revenue and thousands of employees down to zero, absolute zero revenue, and a forced reduction of staff around the world. How do you do that? And we put Scared So What into play in each and every step. I had human resources and business leaders saying, can you do webinar, workshop? Can you come and teach? There was nothing to support the individuals on the journey. And so, yes, I share those real world examples of how we put that into play.
Great. There's another question about, is that more of the detail covered of the D in the ADKAR?
Yeah, so D in ADKAR is wonderful. And again, I can't tell you the lengthy discussions that I had with our change leaders who, again, were champion ADKAR, and rightfully so. Anything that you're going to do in the world has to be researched, has to be vetted. So D, desire. Do I have the desire to support this change in ADKAR? And that's great, but what happens if I A, accept it, or B, I don't accept it? What do you do next? And that's where the so what comes into play. Or, if before I even get to the so what, have I made a favorable decision? If you're not asking the questions to the individual that ties directly to their individual feelings, you won't get the direct answers. So desire just didn't go deep enough for me. At an organizational level, yes, it's fantastic. Do I have overall everybody I think on board? But what about those people who are like, you know what, I just really don't like this, and I'm just not going to tell my boss because if I say anything, I'm going to get fired. How many of those people exist? They're everywhere. How many situations do you have to where leadership launches a change process and we use ADKAR or we use McKinsey's or we use Cotter's or whatever, and we change at people versus change with people. So I identify with ADKAR very deeply, and I actually embrace it and think that it should be utilized. But I think ADKAR overall is a better one to put together with Scared So What, really focusing deeply on the individual.
Great. And there's another question. You can probably read it in the chat better than I can. My font in my chat has gone to like size 110.
Oh, there you go. Let's see which one.
I'm impressed with the Scared model. Can you address some of the resistance from the organizational leaders in adopting the model?
Oh, I can do even better than that. Change leaders. Change leaders is where the strongest resistance came from. And I had to realize that, okay, here I am, the first person in the travel and hospitality industry to go through a master's in science for sales, or even a doctor's in sales. I'm going to get some resistance to anything and everything I do. Some people say it's great to go first, but it's actually, in doing it, it's not so great, because everybody will challenge what you're thinking and challenge what you're saying. It's just up to me to keep having opportunities to speak to wonderful people like Teresa and like yourselves, and hopefully facilitate and plant a seed so that you can facilitate change. So I had my biggest change detractors were from change leaders themselves, people who were well-versed in organizational change management. The typical answer I got was, well, haven't you thought about this model? Haven't you thought about that model? And I wanted to say, no, in the master's and in the doctorate, nobody ever told me that, but I couldn't be that frank. The answer was yes. I had to research heavily the majority of models out there so that I could even get through my research and attain my degrees and my processes. So that they were the biggest challengers. Within the sales leadership and the overall leadership of my business, we had just great adoption and great support. Because again, there's no book out there that says, how am I supposed to be a senior vice president? how am I supposed to be a brand president that champions change and champions individuals? So for me to be inside my entity with Royal Caribbean International and going back to school as an adult and bringing all of that learning back into play, it was real world adoption and real world synopsis change. So again, if you think of the global pandemic, as I said earlier, human resources came to me and said, you've built this within your masters. Can you start to practice it with us now? Because we get it. So it was just a wonderful recipe for us to be able to support our people in a time to where there was nothing to help them on their individual needs.
Right. And so I think coming back to that question a bit, how did you deal with leaders that were resisting the model when you were rolling it out?
The biggest thing was, for me, was to not become defensive myself. So I had to put them at the center of inquiry and respect who they were, especially change leaders, respecting who they are. So if you can imagine, when I was doing my research on this, to be able to reach out to Daryl Conner and get a response from him. I just love him and I love his models. And he was so responsive and receptive. To do the same with Ken Ross, you know, who the SARA curve and the 5 stages of change curve is just one of my all-time favorites. To have a response and to be able to sit down and interview them, and for them to come back and say, you know, we get what you're doing. It's going to be hard. You're going to be faced. It's going to be very hard. So from the change gurus, as I would say, they warned me. And they said, you need to have thick skin, and you need to be calm, and you need to help people through the change, because people are going to just challenge something new, and that's what they do. And I found that. And so I was prepared. So when I was speaking with a change leader who was licensed in ProSki, or, you know, or did their MBA with other change management organizational models, etc., I let them speak. Just let them speak. And more often than not, I would say, what happens when the person rejects the change? And that's when people were completely blank. And I said, I'm a human being. I can accept change, but I can also reject it. And then what? What does your model do to help me build my own so what? There's no answer. It just doesn't exist. So then that's when they were like, okay, light bulb on, let's keep talking. So let them speak, let them vet it out. But if you ask that one question, without all these models that you have, what happens if somebody rejects a change? What are you going to do? There's no answer. That's where Scared So What came into play.
Great. Great. Other questions? Feel welcome just to jump in.
Thank you, Jennifer, for saying the model is fantastic and sorely needed. I believe so as well, too. Hopefully you'll take it and help champion that. And thank you, Baron. I appreciate that as well, too. Thank you. I will definitely connect with you on LinkedIn. Anybody and everybody, I love LinkedIn. It's a great networking. Again, I met my guru, Teresa, there, so I'm a firm believer.
Too generous.
No, you're amazing. You have a plan already, Jennifer. Thank you. And Professor Liu, I'm really impressed to hear your thoughts. Let's connect.
Fantastic.
Christine.
Absolutely, Grant. I've gone through the Kotter models in org behavior and management classes, and nobody's ever asked that question, and it's always dawned on me, what about, without acceptance, results are not achieved.
Yeah.
And it just creates, we're seeing it in the great, silent resignation that's going on now today too.
Yeah, I so hear you. And you think of what's going on in the world today, with banking failures, wars, medical health, just you name it, politics, don't even go there. People are scared. And at the heart of all of my research is the fear of change. You go that deep. You have to go that deep to the foundation, which is metathesis, and find out, that this is real. People can fear change. But then I said, well, what about positive change? Don't we fear that as well too? In a way, our bodies are acting and our minds are acting differently. So if you just tell somebody, oh, don't worry about it, well, you're getting married. You might want to worry about it. You might want to have a plan. It's a positive change. But how do you think about that? And so I just really dissected all of it. And I said, people need to start focusing on the most important thing in change management, and that is people. These are the people that are supposed to execute the change. So it's great that a company has a plan, but if you don't include your people, where's it going to go? And then it expanded from there. I started out this journey for our people within our organization, but I quickly realized through the research and through the expanse where people were giving it to their children, wait a minute, this has a much wider adoptive use. A family member of mine is a school principal in Wichita, Kansas, and he supervises many schools and teachers. They took Scared So What as well too, and found that, well, we can teach this to kids. And I thought, well, there you go. Because again, it's never been taught. So if we can teach people how to manage personal change for themselves, you think about the school bully who's going through massive change. What if they could learn to think it through for themselves? You think of the military veteran who's transitioning from active duty to civilian duty. They're terrified. I know that firsthand because I'm a veteran myself. I was so afraid. I didn't know what to do. Whole new world, whole new life. This could have helped me back then. You think of people who are transitioning from prison reform, nurses, doctors, anybody in the medical profession right now worldwide, and so on and so forth. If we teach people how to manage personal change for themselves, what a different world we could make. And that's where I'm employing each and every one of you. Could you help expand this along the journey? And it's not to buy a book. That's not my personal desire. But if anything, download the app when it launches May 3rd and put the power to manage personal change in your hand. It's free.
Very cool. Very nice. Any other questions for Grant? We have 2 minutes.
Hitomi, thank you so much. And Vicky, thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Grant. This has been a wonderful webinar, and we will be sending out the link for any of you who'd like to watch it again or share it. And very excited to be part of this. I think it's going to be a movement.
I hope so.
Yeah, it's going to be, I think it's very exciting and very well researched, very well tested. So thank you very much for starting it here with us.
You are the first. So
oh, there. You're welcome. Okay, so we will be in touch, and if you have any questions for Grant, you've got his contact, and LinkedIn is the way to go.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.